It was a dark and deadly night, March 12, 1928. The clock tolled 11 p.m., 11:30. Before it could strike the witching hour, 12.5 billion gallons of water came crashing down a Saugus Canyon, turning west at the Santa Clara River, and continuing on its devastating path to the Pacific Ocean. William Mulholland's great St. Francis Dam had collapsed. It was America's worst civil engineering failure of the 20th century, and the loss of life in California history was second only to the San Francisco fire of 1906. I'm Leon Warden, and this is Legacy, Santa Clarita's Living History, brought to you by the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society, the SCV School and Business Alliance, and Valencia Bank and Trust. Relatively few people can be considered experts in the history of the St. Francis Dam, and one of them is Frank Rock. Thanks, Frank, for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, how many people died in the St. Francis Dam disaster?
The total they came to was 450, but the actual number probably was closer to like 600.
What would explain the difference?
A lot of the people who camped alongside the rivers near Fillmore and Santa Paula were, in effect, itinerant farm laborers and people who had no roots, no address, and they couldn't be accounted for.
Sure.
And plus the fact that they had found bodies on the beach in San Diego about a week later,
really?
Which would have attributed to the flood, so it's hard to tell what the exact count was, so they rounded it off to 450 known.
Backing up a ways, when and why was this dam built?
It was built in 1924 and 1926 as part of a extensive reserve program that William Mulholland needed to back up the Los Angeles-Owens Valley aqueduct. He needed enough water in reserve to provide Los Angeles with a year's supply of backup. The St. Francis was part of that. It was part of 5 reservoirs that were extended and 2 that were built from scratch. One being the LA Reservoir, or Hollywood Lake today, and the St. Francis.
Now, Mulholland, who was he and what was his role in all this?
Well, Mulholland was the chief engineer and supervisor of the the Bureau of Waterworks and Supply, which would later on become the Department of Water and Power. He was a self-made man. He was a ditch digger, itinerant Irish immigrant, and literally worked his way up from ditch digger to head engineer of the Bureau of Waterworks and Supply. He, along with Fred Eaton, who was his superior before that, came up with an idea of bringing water to Los Angeles, which was needed at the time because Los Angeles couldn't grow anymore. And so they, Eaton had the idea that there's water up in the Owens Valley, 255 miles away, and he needed Mulholland to tell him that it could be done. So,
what were the politics there? I mean, they went up and, convinced the farmers in the Owens Valley to give LA their water, or what?
More or less, they bought away the land rights and the water rights, and some say that they were swindled, others say they didn't tell them quite what the use was, but in any event, LA got its water in 1913, and Owens Valley started to shrink up and dry up.
Right. Now, where exactly was this water stored in Saugus?
In Saugus, it was stored up in a small canyon, San Francisco Canyon, which is 45 miles north of Los Angeles. And Mulholland had picked the site as a possible storage area when he was building the aqueduct back around 1907, when they were building the Lake Elizabeth Tunnel version of the aqueduct. He saw this large flat plain out beyond this real narrow canyon, so he took a few soil tests and determined that this would be a good area for the county to put a dam in, or rather the city put a dam in, if they ever needed.
So it turned out that it wasn't such a good place. Why not? What was the problem with the area?
Well, a lot of things that they couldn't have known at the time, being technology as it was. It was built on a seismic fault on one point, but that was the minor part. It was also abutted on one side by what would they call the Paleolithic landslide, and the ground was actually moving microscopically. But and on the other side, it was a type of geology to where when it was saturated, it would dissolve.
And there wasn't the scientific know-how at the time to to be aware of those things?
No, just Mulholland said, this is where it's going to be.
Okay.
So,
Now, tell us what happened. Give us the story of what happened on the evening of March 12, 1928.
well, we'll start about earlier that morning. Okay. The dam keeper, Tony Harnesfeger, made a call to William Mulholland that he saw leaks coming out of the west abutment of the dam. And he was concerned about these leaks because they were muddy. And if they were muddy, that would assume that the foundation of the dam was eroding. So Mulholland, with his chief engineer, Harvey Van Norman, came up the next hour and a half, and they did a cursory inspection of the dam to see what the leaks were about. Problem was, there was huge winds coming down the canyon and was pushing water over the face of the dam. The dam had literally maxed out as far as its capacity. It was 3 inches from the top, and the water was being pushed through the spillways. So they couldn't tell where the leaks were coming from and what was spillage. So they did an inspection. Mulholland deemed it fine, but they would look at the cracks later, do repairs later, and went on about it. Later that evening, several scenarios were going on. A carpenter by the name of Ace Hopewell was going on his motorcycle up to his shift at Power Station 1, which is like about 7 miles further up the canyon. And he passed the top of the dam about 5 minutes to midnight. Everything was just fine from what he could see. There were some lights down on the base of the canyon that he couldn't account for. But about a mile past the crest of the dam, he heard some rumblings back down the water. Got off his motorcycle, looked down into the water, couldn't see anything happening. To him, it was just another rock slide that was common in the area. When he got up to Power Station 1, about an hour after that, they realized that he was the last man to see the St. Francis in one piece.
So were there some warning signals that this was coming?
Some people were concerned about the leaks that were coming out of the dam, and ironically, the leaks that they saw were coming out of the west abutment. And then the day of the break, more leaks were starting to protrude from the eastern embankment. The night before, it was found years later through testimonies of people who wanted to be anonymous at the time, the access road had slipped an entire foot the night before. So what had happened was an unstoppable movement. The hillside, the entire hillside on the east abutment was starting to move. And people downstream were concerned over the fact that the water was now coming down the channel. That had nothing really to do with the water breaking. They had no place to send water for extra storage, being as they had huge amounts of rain that winter. And the dam was tapped out, and they couldn't transfer it down, so they just let it out the front spillways. And that was the first time they had opened the spillways since they did the tests in 1926. So the people downstream were kind of concerned about, why we got water now coming down the channel.
Sure. There had been talk, though, at various times, and I think maybe Mulholland himself believed, perhaps, that there was sabotage.
There was a lot of theories running around that there might have been sabotage. The fact that they had found a rope similar to what they would tie up crates of dynamite with. That wouldn't have been unusual because they were using dynamite to construct a new access road for some more work on the dam at that time. Plus, sure, the Owens Valley people were still very mad at Mulholland, and they'd made threats against the dam. People had even said that they were coming down to blow it up. But as engineers of the day have said, in order for them to have done any damage on the dam, they would have had to have taken like 5,000 pounds of TNT 30 feet down up on the water side of the dam to make it do any damage.
Had there not been incidents of violence, though, while the dam was being built?
Yeah, quite a bit up along the aqueduct. Between 1924 and 1927 was the California Water Wars, where the Owens Valley ranchers would go to the aqueduct, the guards, at gunpoint. They'd take the guards, escort them to the county and say, go away, and then they'd proceed to blow up the aqueduct. And it was called shooting the duck. The aqueduct was so big and so open to sabotage. It was going on. So they blew up a whole 400-foot section at one point, and
Really?
And that's when the dam.
People die?
Nobody died, but Mulholland did use his authority to say to use federal or state authorities to shoot on sight anybody found tampering with the aqueduct.
Right. Now, March 12 comes along. There had been some questions about leaking. What was the evening like?
From what the witnesses had said, that the canyon, the winds had stopped from earlier that morning, but there was a moon rising, and it was still pretty clear. Later on that evening, up from the lower areas, more fog and clouds had rolled in. But it was a pretty
So no environmental factors, no earth movement that anybody knows about?
No. It was just
went.
How
many people live down below the dam?
At the power station 2 cottages, there was 71 people.
Now this is how far from the dam?
That's a mile and a half down from the dam.
Below the dam.
Right. Tony Harnesfeger, his fiance, and his 6-year-old son lived a quarter mile from the face of the dam. And there were various ranches, all pocketed down south of the power station. There's the Smiths, Arachios, Ruiz, Rivera, all had ranches that were all wiped out.
And the actor Harry Carey Sr. had a ranch.
And Harry Carey had his trading post and his ranch. There's the old myth about, no, it's not a myth, there's the story about one of his Navajo silversmiths named Dina Telbagay was a Navajo shaman. And he had a vision that the dam was going to break, and he wanted to take his family back to their reservation in Arizona, which Harry Carey said allowed them because he was leaving to go back to New York at that time. And there's some question as to when he had the vision and when it broke. I think people said it was the next day. In actuality, it was probably like about a month later. And Harry Carey Jr. was kind enough about 10 years ago to give me a whole rundown on the thing to separate what was myth and what is truth.
Right. But the Harry Carey Ranch would be washed away.
The lower parts of the ranch, all the farmland, the Navajoan trading post, the ranch house itself was well above the water line, so it survived. But 2 of his caretakers were killed, and untold stock and alfalfa, hay, corn, all the farm crops are gone.
Sure. The dam breaks at 3.5 minutes before midnight. You've got a 180-foot high wall of water.
The initial wave coming out of the dam was coming out at 1.7 million cubic feet per second, and it's about 180 feet coming out of the east side, they determine. It is traveling at what doesn't sound an astounding 18 miles an hour, but it's like a whole mountain of debris is moving at 18 miles an hour, splashing down the flats. About 5 minutes later, it hits power station 2, flattens it like a crate of eggs. 3 people survived from out of the 71 people in the cottages, and one of those was Lillian Curtis and her son Daniel, and Ray Rising, who was another worker there. And it was pretty horrendous because they literally were caught in their sleep, and it was like the end of the world to everybody there.
Then where did the water go?
The water followed its natural path down San Francisco Canyon, out the mouth of the canyon, hitting what is now the Magic Mountain Curve, the Edison Power Station. It takes out the towers at the power station, goes down into the flat area, which would be Magic Mountain today, traveling west into Castaic, splashing up into Castaic, where it's at its deepest flatland area at 70 feet. Takes out the McIntyre family's holiday cabins, and starts heading now the natural Santa Clara River Basin, going down through Piru, Fillmore.
What is today 126?
Right, the 126. It hits a place called Kemp and the Blue Cut Point, which is literally on the Los Angeles Ventura County border. And there's a work crew there from Edison who'd been putting in some power lines for the last several months. There's 150 of them asleep in their tents. About 84 of the men were killed in their sleep. The water at this point was traveling like about maybe 15 miles an hour. Problem was, the water was 50% water, 50% debris, and Blue Cut was literally some sort of oddity in nature because the canyon itself was too narrow for the water to push through, so it came back on itself, caused an eddy, a whirlpool.
A whirlpool.
And men were literally caught in a whirlpool, and one actually were even tossed out from the centrifugal force up into dry land, unconscious, but some were found the next day alive, but unconscious. So, and it just continued its way down the river, and then out past Santa Paula, Satacoy, and Montalvo, and then came out above Oxnard and El Rio.
Washing away homes, oak trees, washing bodies, cars, trucks.
Livestock, you name it.
Wasn't there a St. Francis Dam version of a Paul Revere?
There were several. The one known from Santa Paula was Thornton Edwards. He was a state policeman, and he got the word from a bunch of ladies who stayed at the telephones all night relaying information, and got on his motorcycle, went to the lower areas, neighborhoods, and there he was only one person, so he needed all the help he could get. So instead of going to every house, he went to every other house and told them, go back to the other house, tell them what's happening, and so he was able to save a lot of lives.
Sure. Mulholland was not asked to rebuild the St. Francis Dam.
No, and in fact, he was ready to resign. He took full blame for everything, which isn't heard of these days with politicians, but he took full responsibility because it was built on his say-so, and he was devastated that so many people had died. He wouldn't sleep until he had all the rescue efforts in place. By sunup, our own local Red Cross was already serving hot soup and coffee and getting people ready for whatever needed be. But Mulholland was literally devastated after this, and no, he did not rebuild, but they did rebuild a dam in Bouquet Canyon.
Right. Bodies after the dam disaster were taken to makeshift morgue in Newhall.
Right. In the old courthouse and dance hall was used as a morgue, as was the theater, the store right now, the old pharmacy next to the Newhall Hardware.
We're talking basically about like Railroad and Market Street.
Exactly. Right.
Okay. Now every year you do a presentation on the dam for the Historical Society, and it tends to draw a bunch of people.
Yeah, this year was quite a turnout.
Well, we went out there this year with a camera, and let's take a look at the talk, and then you take them on a tour. Why don't you tell us a little bit what's going on here?
Well, I'm giving the presentation every year. I give a slideshow, and this year was our first PowerPoint presentation of what we've just been discussing regarding how and when the dam was built, who was responsible, all the particulars.
Looks like you drew a pretty good crowd.
This was our biggest crowd yet. We had, I think, about 160 people just for the lecture alone. The tour group.
There's Ivan Dorset.
Ivan Dorset is the brother of one of the 3 survivors of the power station.
Mike Coralejo.
And this is everybody getting checked in onto the buses. They were really great this year. We filled 3 buses, and it's kind of fun going up there too, because I give sort of a reverse discussion of the disaster. And we had Kathy Martin there, whose family, the Materians, grew up in San Francisco Canyon.
Well, now, in fact, they used to own the site of the Ruiz Cemetery.
That's right, and that's what we see here. And this is where the Ruiz family of 6 is buried, along with various other known and unknown victims of the flood.
Now, this is actually a family cemetery, I guess, so it's not just dam victims here.
Right. There are many Native Americans buried there, as well as old families that lived in the areas, and not just Placerita.
And even from the Newhall.
From Newhall and San Francisco.
No names on some of the gravestones.
Right, and that's the Ruiz stone markers.
William S. Hart.
William S. Hart and the Hart Cowboys dedicating a plaque to those who perished in the flood. And
didn't Hart walk all the way from Newhall up to the burial grounds here?
I think that's one of the rumors. It could have been, but he himself was engaged in dressing one of the unknown boys to be buried, and just before he was buried, his mother did identify him.
Right. Where are we now?
Now we're at Power Station 2, and I always like to stop here because this gives people a good indicator of just how huge the flood was. I mean, the flood was literally 60 feet above the top of the power station there. The power station was built on the same foundation, and several years later they added in another penstock, which is one of those large pipes going up the hillside there.
Right.
I always need my bullhorn because we get a larger crowd every year.
Now we've gone farther up the canyon.
Mm-hmm. Now that is one of the smaller fragments of St. Francis, laying down about a half mile from the face of the dam.
So you can still see pieces of the dam if you go up San Francisco Canyon Road.
You can't trip over anything that isn't St. Francis out in the flats, because later on workers came in and dynamited and jackhammered all the remains, and everything is just pretty much laying around there.
Well, there you are with your bullhorn again. What are we looking at?
We're now up on the ridge looking down over the main ruins, and
There's
fielding questions about, again, how it went down, and that's then and now.
That was the famous tombstone that was left behind.
Right.
And then later, I guess, dynamited about a year later.
Yeah, about a year later, a boy was playing in the ruins and was unfortunately killed when he fell from them. And so, for PR and safety reasons, they finally took it down.
A little farther up the hill here?
Yeah, now we're going up on the main ridge west of the main dam, and that's called the wing dike. That was part of the structure. That's the wing dike everybody's sitting on. It was a structure that was added to the construction of the dam after it had been built, and was one of the reasons.
So it wasn't part of the original engineering?
No, they during the design phase they added 10 feet, and they added another 10 feet after construction had begun without extending the base of the dam. Hence, one of the reasons the dam went down.
And so that's the add-on portion there on the top.
As we're panning to the left, yeah. There's the thrust block from the main part, and then...
And I guess there are theories that the additional 10 or 15 feet or whatever it was added to could have contributed, been a factor in the collapse?
Right, from some of the records, like the Stillings gauge, which measures how the water is filling up in the dam, showed it was dipping before it broke, so the pressure on the dam was being pushed forward. It was literally tipping before it broke.
Rocks in the concrete.
There's another story. This is a part of the little weir that they built in the saddle of the adjoining the wing dike. They were going to build an auxiliary spill channel down the canyon. Anyway, the rocks were unpolished when they put into the cement mix, meaning that which would not give a good seal. They, up until this time, they didn't think that concrete was porous or could be saturated. Well, when they looked at the ruins after the flood, for weeks the main ruins would bleed water. So water was being pushed out of the seams of the concrete.
They just threw anything in there into the concrete. So this is where the reservoir was.
That was what's left of the reservoir. It's gorgeous this time of year because it's green. And that is one of the famous photos, two photos of St. Francis. That was taken about 10 till noon, 10 o'clock or sometime around noon, March 12th. That's Mulholland, Van Norman, and Harnisvegger on the dam, and that you can see it's 3 inches from the spillway.
Right. And today.
And we're looking down where all the buses were parked, and it's always a great hike, and we were lucky enough to have a great day. Everything down there is, and there's our friend.
Got a little bit of nature there with a rattlesnake, huh?
Right. And
yeah, you gotta watch out for rattlers if you go hiking in any one of these canyons. Well, now, how did you get involved in that? You're a muralist. You're an artist. How do you get from there to becoming an expert on the St. Francis Dam? Why the interest?
Oh, I've had a lot of interests, but I pretty much grew up in this area since I was 10 years old. And you
went to high school out here?
And when I was in football in high school, one of the cheerleaders who lived up in Power Station 1, had parties for all the teams up there, and we'd pass through this area and you'd see all the ruins. And even back then, you took it for granted, like, well, sure, it's here, but I didn't pick up an interest until years later when I moved back and got involved with the Historical Society, and then used to go to the talks given every year by our departed Jerry Reynolds, and started thinking, we can do a better presentation because this one is getting old and scratchy. So I started getting into it more and more, and more information I picked up. Myths were thrown aside, more truths were brought in, and it kept on.
And it seems the story of the St. Francis Dam hasn't really been told to the extent that some other major things in California history have been.
Right, exactly. It's outside of this area, it's unknown. Like you said, it's the second worst disaster in the history of California. But the DWP never even made mention of it in their literature unless you really asked them.
They probably wanted to gloss over that one.
Right, exactly.
Well, I thank you for carrying the torch and spreading the word about the St. Francis Dam and keeping some of these things alive, because we do have a lot of history about in this valley. And you can find out more by visiting scvhistory.com on the internet, or stop by the Saugus Station, Saturdays or Sundays 1 to 4. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Legacy, Santa Clarita's Living History. I'm Leon Warden. Good night.